Hello and welcome everybody to ARC PDX. I'm Wesley Ogle and we are on the road this morning at Government Camp on Mount Hood. As you probably know already, we go on the road every Friday to dive deep into the biggest story of the week. And right now, Oregon is experiencing a record low snowpack since scientists started tracking data in the early 1980s. I mean, just look at Summit Pass here. It is almost completely bare. This makes the region more vulnerable to wildfires while also impacting agriculture, recreation, and our economy. So this morning, we're going to be talking with climate scientists about these impacts and whether our snowpack can even recover. We're also going to check in with Mount Hood Skibowl because they have actually had to already suspend skiing and riding because of these poor conditions. So let's start with a little lesson on snowpack. According to the USDA, between 60 to 70% of water supplies in the Northwest come from snowmelt. Scientists track what's called a snow water equivalent, or SWE, which is the measurement of the amount of liquid water contained in the snow. The USDA says snowpack has been decreasing in many areas across the Northwest. Also, as Earth's climate changes, the amount of snowpack and when it peaks has shifted, and that affects water allocation, plants, and animals. So now let's get to our first expert to get a better understanding of these impacts and our future outlook. She's a professor and chair of the Geography and Environmental Sciences Department at Oregon State University. She's also the director of the Oregon Climate Change Research Institute. So joining me now live is Erica Fleishman. Erica, thank you so much for joining us on ARC PDX this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so when you, of course, so when you take a look at Oregon snowpack and this unusually warm and dry winter we're having, what are the numbers or the statistics that stand out most to you?
This is part of a trend. We are undergoing a trend toward warmer winters, warmer throughout the year. And in recent years, we can see that our snowpack often, as you said, is melting out earlier. So this is part of a trend. What sticks out to me are not so much the statistics from one year, but the overall trend toward, even when we get a lot of precipitation, more of it will be coming as rain than as snow, especially at lower elevations. So I see the future.
So how does this year compare to what we've seen in the past? I mean, is this truly the worst that we've seen?
It depends what type of measurement you're looking at. It's among the years where we've had the lowest snowpack. At this point in time, it's difficult from place to place to say, is it the worst on record? Is it not the worst on record? But again, I really don't think that it's as meaningful to focus on, is it the worst? Is it the second worst? Is it the third worst? As to say that the snowpack is low, and it's likely that in coming years we will be dealing with many snowpack years that are similarly low.
So why exactly, explain to people who may not have been following this, why is this happening? Is it mostly a rain issue or a temperature issue? Is it both of those things equally?
It's a lot of things. In part, it's a temperature issue. So when we're getting precipitation this winter, because it's been warm, more of that precipitation is falling as rain than as snow, especially at the lower elevations. In Oregon, in a general sense, December was fairly wet, but it was warm, so most of our precipitation came as rain, again, except at the very highest elevations. And then January, on the whole, has been quite dry. So we're seeing a mix of what people often refer to as warm snow drought at the beginning of the season, where we got precipitation but not as snow. And then over the past month or so, we've been getting what people refer to as dry snow drought, which means that we're not getting much precipitation at all.
So can our snowpack even recover from this? Like, what would have to happen and when would it have to happen to recover?
This year, we're unlikely to hit the long-term average, almost no matter what happens. I mean, you could say in theory, if it started snowing today and continued snowing every day for the next 2 months, maybe snowpack would be at average levels or above average levels. That's unlikely. So in all likelihood, even if our snowpack recovers somewhat, especially with the storms that are predicted over the next week or two, our snowpack is going to remain low this year. And that's something that we can be preparing for right now because it's unlikely to hit our long-term averages.
So let's talk about how we can prepare for this. Like, what are you expecting to happen? What's going to be impacted in our region, you know, looking at the spring and this summer and fall?
Yeah, we know that we're going to have low stream flows in summer. We can say that with quite a bit of confidence. It's likely that there will be water curtailments for agricultural purposes. We know that. Beyond that, it depends. I mean, there's a lot of speculation about wildfire season. There are a lot of factors that go into whether wildfire season is long, the area burned, the number of wildfires, what have you. People can certainly use their situational awareness, knowing that it has been a dry year and that there's not much snowpack, to be extremely careful with anything that could release a spark. So more than half of the wildfires in Oregon and across the western United States are caused by human activity. That could be something like a vehicle throwing off a spark in a dry area. It can be an accident with landscaping. It's rarely arson, although there are arson cases. But people, when they're recreating, being very careful about use of campfires or anything like that, minimizing use of fireworks, thinking about being very careful when there's any debris burning. So there are things that people can do to try to minimize the sparks. That will help a lot.
Is there something about the impacts from this low snowpack that you're looking toward that worries you the absolute most of everything?
What worries me the most is the effects on people. I mean, water is our most precious resource, and when people don't have enough water, their health tends to suffer, the economy tends to suffer, a lot of things that we value tend to suffer. So when I see low snowpack, I worry about people.
Definitely. What role does climate change play in all of this and the trends that we're seeing?
The world is getting warmer. And as the world gets warmer, we will see less snow. Again, we might see over the long term an equal or even a greater amount of precipitation, but because it's warmer, we will see less of that falling as snow. So again, we're going to see less snowpack over the years to come. We're going to have to learn how to live with less of that water in our snow reservoirs over the years to come.
And I want to ask you about something that just happened yesterday. The Trump administration finalized rules that revoke the EPA's ability to regulate climate pollution. What's your take on this, especially seeing what we're seeing this winter?
Revocation of the endangerment rule is not consistent with scientific consensus that climate change is happening and that climate change is having major effects on people's health and well-being. Also inconsistent with a consensus that climate change is having negative effects on our national economy and probably on the global economy.
And I imagine that scientists have been warning us about this trend possibly happening for years, possibly decades. Are you seeing things playing out now the way that you expected to, or scientists have expected to, in terms of climate change?
What's happening is what has been projected by climate scientists for some time. There are some uncertainties in exactly what is going to happen as climate changes, but what we're seeing right now in Oregon as far as warmer temperatures, lower snowpack, absolutely, this has been projected for a long time. None of us like to see it. We would all like to be wrong, but what we're seeing absolutely is consistent with scientific consensus on what to expect as greenhouse gas emissions continue and as the planet continues to warm.
So probably the most important question I could ask you is, what can be done about this? What do we need to do?
Well, there are two things. So we often talk about the mitigation side, which is reducing global emissions of greenhouse gases, and the U.S. could play its part in reducing global emissions. Beyond that, even if greenhouse gas emissions stop today, the world would continue to warm for a while. That's because many of the gases don't immediately disappear. They stay in the atmosphere for many years, in some cases many hundreds of years. So it's very important to adapt, to think about how we can, to the greatest extent possible, maintain the things that we care about, quality of life, economic opportunity, as climate continues to change. So adaptation is a major focus.
I just would love to ask you really quickly before we let you go, about 15 seconds, as you're sitting where you are right now, seeing what's happening here in Oregon, how do you feel about the next 10, 20, 30, 50 years?
I worry about people. I worry how quickly a lot of our systems can adapt. I worry about how quickly agriculture can adapt. Can we do more dryland farming, for example? How can we sustain a lot of our rural communities that are heavily resource dependent and don't have a lot of buffer to survive? And that's coastal, that's inland, that's you name it. So I really worry about the stress on people.
Erica Fleishman with OSU, really appreciate your time and your expertise. It was great to talk to you this morning.
Thanks very much.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to ARC PDX. I'm Wesley Ogle, and we are on the road this morning at Government Camp on Mount Hood. We go on the road every Friday to dive deep into the biggest story of the week. And right now, Oregon is experiencing a record low snowpack since scientists even started tracking this data in the early 1980s. I mean, you can just see Summit Pass right behind me is so bare. It should not look like this in February. And this makes the region more vulnerable to wildfires while also impacting agriculture, recreation, and our economy. This historically dry and warm winter is already impacting Oregon ski resorts. Mount Hood Skibowl suspended skiing and riding operations last month because of insufficient snow. That also comes after a historically late opening day to ski season. A Skibowl spokesperson was not able to join us live this morning, but earlier this week, I talked with Mike Quinn, the vice president and general manager of Skibowl. Here's part of our conversation. So Skibowl suspended skiing and riding operations back in January. What forced you guys to make this move?
Yeah, unfortunately, the lack of snowfall just caught up with us. We were fortunate enough to keep the little snowfall that we had for the delayed opening in most of the month of January, but we just the weather turned a little bit warmer and brought some mild temperatures in for an sustained period of time, and we just weren't able to keep it going quite that much. Skiing and riding, that is.
So how common is this that you have had to suspend your operations during a season?
Well, it's not super common. However, I would recognize that it is cyclical and it does happen from time to time.
Right.
And it really just kind of shows the importance to
If my
diversify your
camera's off, if I
operations,
can go home.
one of the things that we did this year, of course, is our snow tubing park has really been able to be, a powerhouse for us and keep sustained operations open, which was a big strength.
Yeah, and I know that we just got some snow on Hood. Meadows and Timberline are reporting 7 inches at their resorts. What have you guys seen at Skibowl?
Yeah, we're fortunate that it turned for us too, and we've seen about 3 inches of new snow this morning. So we're really excited for the return of what appears to be the winter weather.
I think that was
So is this enough to get skiing and riding back up, or what is it going to take to bring back those operations?
Yeah, unfortunately, we're kind of almost back to zero. So we need about another 2 feet up to 3 feet in some locations on the steeper slopes with the terrain on those steeper pitches. But we remain, really positive about it. And again, we're fully operational with our tubing hill, and that's really been one of the things that has allowed us to kind of stay in the game, so to speak. It allows, the winter recreation and our guests to still come up and enjoy the mountain, as well as it sustains jobs and revenue flow for us.
When you think of those other times that you have had to suspend your operations, where does this fall in that? Like, how much more serious maybe is this suspension in terms of the length of it or the outlook of when you think you're going to be able to bring stuff back?
That's a good question. This has, unfortunately, historically, this has been the worst winter on record for Oregon. We finally kind of lapsed that last year in 1981, I believe, was the previous worst year to this. Cyclically, we've really seen, we still averaged, a little over 100 skier days a year. And I kind of looked back in preparation for this interview. And if I look at the last 40 years, we're on average about 104 operating days. When I look back at the last 10 or 12 years, it's really almost the same thing at 102. So depending on what 10-year block you look at, we're kind of staying the same, but it is cyclical, and sometimes they're not always spaced out. Just 2 years ago, we had a delayed opening on January 9th. Ironically, the same day we opened for this season skiing and riding, But what was different was that year we didn't have to sustain or suspend operations. We were able to sustain that winter, and we actually ended up having a really good second half of the winter. So that's possible too. February being one of the most snowiest months of the winter, we still have a lot of the season in balance that we hope that we could turn this around.
How hopeful are you that it can be turned around?
I'm extremely hopeful that it can be turned around. I mean, the weather patterns and forecasts have started to line up. They were very volatile for a long time. Not all the models were saying the same thing. We're starting to see them come together and they're be a little bit more in sync with each other and in concert. So we're really hopeful that this is the start of the second winter, so to speak. And then, within a few days to a week or so, we get up to full operations again. But in the meantime, we're happy that we have that tubing to offer 4 nights a week and 2 days a week.
So at least you have the tubing operations fully going, but how is this affecting your bottom line? I mean, how is this for your business that you can't have skiing and riding right now?
Well, I mean, it is tough. You could imagine, half of your operations or even more than half of your operations aren't open. So, that's a big hit to the bottom line. Again, one of the strengths of Skibowl is diversification, not only for, year-round opportunities, but we're also part of a larger family of organization of the Resort of the Cascades, where we have diversification in Eastern Oregon with Lake Centustus, Collins Lake Resort, Canita Hot Springs. So really trying not to keep all of our eggs in one basket has been the key for us.
And I know that you're saying this is cyclical. You're hopeful that this is gonna end up being an okay season, but where you're sitting right now as you look toward the future and our changing climate, how are you feeling when you're looking 10, 20 years down the road for Skibowl?
You know, that's something that Skibow's been doing for 30 years. We've been very diversified as one of the early adopters for summer operations in the ski industry. Not, the earliest, but one of the early adopters in the industry. And we've built such a big summer clientele and a summer adventure park. So that's really helped us sustain year-round operations. And we're continuing to look at winter um, opportunities for us to kind of not be so dependent on snowfall. Our master plan is calling for things like a mountain coaster. That is an all-weather type ride that, it's more summer centric, but it can also operate in the winter too. Those types of things combined with the tubing operations really helps us insulate for these wild swings.
Wow, I am looking forward to learning more about that coaster. That's really cool. In terms of like if you wanted to make sure that the skiing and riding was staying robust and you could keep that going, what do you have on the mountain right now in terms of like snow making abilities or abilities to kind of to work with the small amount of snowfall that you do get?
Yeah, well, our tubing operations has an all-weather snowmaking machine, which has allowed us to get open almost every single year on time on that Thanksgiving weekend. We purposely made the decision to kind of hold back a little bit this year with the warm weather creeping in. But it's unlike traditional snowmaking where it still requires cold temperatures and it uses forced air and high pressure water to freeze water molecules like actual snow. This is actually a refrigerated vessel that sprays water, freezes the snow, and creates snowmaking in really abnormal temperatures. So we've invested in that, which we can see the fruits of that labor. And we have about 7 other snowmaking guns that we were able to strategically put in high traffic areas and base area where that allows us to. We actually have opened our rope tow terrain park last week. We reopened it after we suspended skiing and riding operations because we were able to consolidate and farm snow. So we get unique and try different things and pivot when we can.
Any last message for people who love Ski Bowl, who use it, season pass holders? What would you like to tell people?
Thank you very much for your patience and understanding with us. We will be releasing a message out to all of our pass holders this year, offering them a couple of additional benefits like some free tubing and some visits to Canita. So they'll be interested to receive that from us, I believe, today. And that there's still a lot of season to be had. So, don't throw in the towel yet. We certainly aren't like I said earlier, there is tubing available 4 days a week and 4 nights a week and 2 days. And we're really looking forward to getting back in operations as soon as we possibly can. So hang in there, everyone.
Well, thank you so much, Mike, and good luck to you guys. I'll do my snow dances.
Thank you. Always a pleasure, Wesley. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Take care.
Here's a live look at Mount Hood right now. ArcPDX is on the road diving into this unprecedented snow drought here in Oregon and the Pacific Northwest. Earlier this week, NOAA's National Integrated Drought Information System team held a news briefing to talk about current conditions. Here's Jason Gerlick, coordinator of the Pacific Northwest Drought Early Warning System, providing an overview for the whole region.
So for that regional overview, we can see here that snow water equivalent graph for the Columbia River Basin of the Pacific Northwest region. Overlaid here in black, we can see where we are currently in 2026. Blue is 2015 and 2001 is in red, and these are other analogous low snow years that we have experienced. So it's currently for this region, for the Columbia River Basin, we are in the second percentile, meaning that snowpack is among the lowest 2% of all of these years on record. And when we look at our statewide SWE, our statewide snow water equivalent, we can see that Oregon is also at the 0th percentile. This is the lowest snowpack, therefore, for the period of record we have on this date. Idaho as well, and Washington is at the 5th percentile. And what this means that some of our critical water supply basins, like the Willamette, the Deschutes, the Yakima, Boise, and Spokane, are also all experiencing severe snow drought or that low snow water storage. Additional way that we can visualize this is through some of this aerial imagery, where we can see that the lack of snowpack at the lower to mid elevations, and a lot of that snow is here confined at the higher elevations. This example provides a very great visual representation of how snow drought can manifest itself across the landscape. Some other snow drought visuals, again, to help provide context for the following presentations, is here we can see a SNOTEL survey site here in Idaho, where we can use this flagpole as a reference. This is about 1 year apart, from January 2025 to January 2026. And you can see how much snow there's missing at this site here in Idaho, or ways that it manifests itself here across the landscape, looking out on the South Fork Burnt River Basin here in eastern Oregon, and just how little snow that there is present across the landscape that is critical for that water availability to supply water for our economic sectors like agriculture, recreation, and energy.
Leading scientists from states across the region, including Oregon, Washington, and Idaho, were at this briefing to talk about the data they're seeing. We'll hear from the Washington State Climate Office coming up in the next hour.
We go on the road every Friday to dive deep into the biggest story of the week, and this is the one everybody's talking about right now. Oregon is experiencing record low snowpack since scientists started tracking the data in the early 1980s. I mean, just look at Summit Pass behind me. It is almost completely bare. This makes the region more vulnerable to wildfires, while also impacting agriculture, recreation, and our economy. So this morning, we're talking with climate scientists about these impacts and whether our snowpack can recover. We're also going to check in with Mount Hood Skibowl, because they have already had to suspend skiing and riding because of these poor snow conditions. So let's get started with a little lesson on snowpack. According to the USDA, between 60 to 70% of water supplies in the Northwest come from snowmelt. Scientists track what's called a snow water equivalent, or SWE, which is the measurement of the amount of liquid water contained in the snow. The USDA says snowpack has been decreasing in many areas across the Northwest. Also, as Earth's climate changes, the amount of snowpack and when it peaks has shifted, and that affects water allocation, plants, animals, and of course us. So we're talking with the experts this morning to get a better understanding of these impacts and the future outlook. Our next guest is a meteorologist and engagement specialist for Climate Central. That's a nonprofit group of scientists and communicators who research changing climates and its impacts. So joining us live now is Shel Winkley. Shel, thank you so much for joining us on ArcPDX this morning.
Yeah, Wesley, thanks for having us, and happy to chat about snow or the lack thereof.
I know, right? As happy as we can be, I guess. When you take a look at Oregon's snowpack right now and our unusually warm and dry winter, maybe what are the statistics or the numbers that really stand out to you the most?
Yeah, so Oregon is part of the puzzle. This is really, you can balloon it out and look at the entire Western US, but this is not only the warmest winter of record for most of the Western United States, basically from the plains to the Pacific coast, but also one of the driest with the lowest snowpack. So you were just talking about that snow water equivalent. I was looking up the latest numbers from the USDA. Right now it's at a record low across Oregon at about 26 to 30%. Is what's there. And that it's just never been seen to be this low at this time of the year. Part of that is because of the pattern that we're in. We've got a La Nina pattern, which is a little more shifted to the east than what would normally be. So that's the reason why the eastern side of the US is so cold. But it's also keeping us from getting a lot of timely snow, but it's also allowing for warmer temperatures. So even if we can get some snow and then we get back above that freeze line, that's where we're going to find the melting that occurs, which only continues to hinder the snowpack.
Yeah. And I want to ask you this because I know you know about what's happening across the entire country. How does what's happening here in the West compare to what's happening in other parts of the country? Because we've seen the East Coast get a ton of snow this winter.
It is, and that's that La Nina pattern. So you get this big area of high pressure that's taking the jet stream from basically Alaska and Canada and allowing all that cold air to funnel into the eastern US, which for a lot of eastern US folks, it is the coldest winter that they can remember for quite some time. But when you look at the records, even the cold that's being experienced in the eastern US for the most part is not the coldest winter that we've experienced, and for a lot of us by far. You can see the records there for Portland. That kind of goes along the same idea for the West. So while we're seeing this extreme cold in the East, but not record setting, in the West, we're seeing extreme warmth at wintertime, and it is record setting. And what we know about climate change is that there is still cold in the world, but we understand that record heat is outpacing record cold. So that graphic that you see there on your screen, just in the 2020s, 76 daily records have been set for temperatures in Portland specifically. 88% of those, or 67 of those, have been for record heat. Only 9 of those, or 12% of them, have been for record cold. So we understand that the records when it comes to heat is just more extreme than even some of the cold that we're experiencing currently.
Wow, it's just wild. So do you think our snowpack can recover? And if so, what would have to happen and when would that have to happen?
It would have to happen now. It would have to be just a blockbuster amount of snow over the next couple of weeks, right? You're coming to the end of your winter season. You're coming to the end of really the snowier season. We can see some of that into the beginning of spring, but we also know that spring warmth is creeping into the back end of winter. And so for, Portland specifically, we're seeing about 4 less days, a lot of that on the back end of the season when it comes to those winter temperatures. So there's a big blockbuster storm that's going to try to produce some snow for the Western US as we go through the weekend and early part of next week. But really, it's not going to be enough to catch up. And I don't think that it's going to be enough to even get you past this record low snowpack that you're experiencing this year.
Wow. Yeah. So it's inevitable. This is happening. We have to be ready for the impacts of this. Which impacts are you looking at the most in terms of what we're going to see maybe later this, spring, fall, summer?
Yeah, that's a great question because we know what happens in winter, right? Everyone doesn't love winter. I think when you live where you do there in Oregon, that a lot of folks do look forward to the cold and to the snow. But what we understand is that the impacts of winter, what does not happen in winter, ripples through the rest of the year. So that snow melt's so important, at least for, let's say, water. You mentioned agriculture earlier because it's a very slow release as the water is melting to then recharge our reservoirs or aquifers, the things that we get our water from. We won't have that this year. So there's the drought that's ongoing in the West that only will continue to get worse, most likely, because we don't have that snowpack water. And then that also leads to the wildfire concern. As we start getting into the hotter months, even with La Nina breaking down, this is going to leave you at such a big deficit that really could bring implications for the fire season.
So what of the impacts worries you the most, or should we be all worried about the most?
I think honestly, a couple different things here. One, it's the water, right? We know that water is a significant issue that we have to tackle as a collective in the West. So that's part of it. That's that drought conditions. And especially we know for the Western US that the drought that we're experiencing is made worse by the warmer temperatures that is occurring because of the burning of coal, oil, and methane gas, releasing those greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. So because of that, the drought is easier to get into, but it's much harder to get out of. The other side of that too is that we know that the Western US, there's a lot of studies that have looked at this, but it's kind of the bullseye when you look at the globe as a whole for a snow drought to occur. So not to say that every season is going to be this bad, but we have to understand that with climate change and the way that things have warmed up, this is a season that is going to be a benchmark. And we have to understand how we're going to adapt, because we know that a season like this most likely will happen again and very well could become more of a normal than what is a typical snowpack that we usually see for Oregon and the West.
Yeah, and since we know, we have climate change to thank for this, I want to ask you about what happened yesterday with the engagement finding, where the Trump administration finalized rules that revoke the EPA's ability to regulate climate pollution, especially when you're considering what we're seeing here this winter. What's your take on this rollback?
Yeah, I mean, the science is clear. There's overwhelming consensus that we understand that the planet is warming. And yes, there has always been a change of temperatures on the planet. But when you correlate the amount of CO2 and carbon pollution that's been put into the atmosphere alongside the rise of temperatures, we've never seen an increase this sharp before. 69% of warming from greenhouse gases is from CO2, from that carbon pollution, the things that come out of our tailpipes or how we get a lot of our electricity. 26% of that is methane, and we know that those two alone are responsible for about 3 degrees Fahrenheit of warming that has happened on this planet. That doesn't sound like a lot, but think about when your internal body temperature warms by about 3 degrees, you're unwell. And so that's essentially what we understand. We know that the warmth that we've experienced, we've now seen the 3 warmest years of record for the Earth happen in 2024, 2023, and 2025. We know with sound science that there is a correlation between what we're putting into our atmosphere and the rise in temperatures and the impacts that we're seeing with extreme weather, both on the higher end with floods and with hurricanes, but also in what you're experiencing this winter. Extreme warmth in a winter season, as well as a very low snowpack there in the West.
So probably the most important question of all then is, what can we do about this? What do we have to do?
Yeah, so the thing that I always like to say is the first thing is what we're doing today, Wesley. Conversation and communication is the place to start. And that really helps to open up. You think a lot of people might not want to talk about climate change, but you'd be surprised that how many people are concerned about it and how many people actually do want to talk about it. So that's the place to start there in Portland, in your community. Figure out what you can do to mitigate the heat, to draw down that carbon pollution locally. Ultimately, this is going to be a bigger scale thing. We have to work on this as United States, as one of the biggest emitters of this carbon pollution in the world. And then we do have to work with global leaders to work on the things that will change, to bring down that carbon pollution and to do the things that we know that are better for the environment and are getting cheaper, which is things like renewable energy or EVs. Not everybody has the ability to do that personally right now. So that's where those local mitigation actions and just having those conversations with you, your neighbors, your family, and your city officials really helps.
Shel Winkley with Climate Central, you were fantastic. Thank you so much for your wealth of knowledge on this. I really appreciate your time this morning.
Yeah, I really hope that you guys, in the words of Elsa, get to build a snowman and start to see those flakes flying a little bit more before the spring comes.
Yeah, I don't even think there's enough back there to do that. Shel, thank you so much. Hope we get more. Yeah, have a great day. And while Oregon has the worst outlook, this is an issue across the entire Pacific Northwest. So during a news briefing this week, Karin Bumbaco with the Washington State Climate Office shared an in-depth look at the current conditions up there. Here's part of that, part of what she said.
So October through January is actually the warmest first 4 months of the water year on record, averaged across Washington state. These records go back to 1895, and I'm referencing a normal from 1991 to 2020. So just over 3 degrees Fahrenheit above normal for that period. Our precipitation picture is a little more complicated, I think, compared to Oregon and Idaho. This is the water year precipitation where we're still seeing above normal amounts of precipitation in our Cascade Mountains in Washington, our Olympic Mountains, some parts of northeastern Washington, but near normal to below in other parts of the state. And this will zoom in on it a little more. So as many of you are aware, we had an extremely wet December with serious flooding in Western Washington and actually on some of the east slopes of the Cascades as well. So that's showing our December precipitation percent of normal precipitation extremely high for the mountains of Washington and other parts. Again, this was extremely warm, so it fell mostly as rain rather than snow. And then as we've shifted on the right-hand side, this is about the last month or so, a little bit into February. So since January 1st, we're starting to see more of a dry signal with our sunny days like now. So precipitation percent of normal, really less than 50% of normal for a lot of these kind of dark brown colors on the east slopes of the Cascades in southeastern Washington, and then over in the rain shadow of the Olympic Mountains as well in western Washington. So the black line is kind of how our snowpack evolves over the water year. The green line is our median, and then I put a few other years to compare to 2026, which is black. 2005 and 2015 were both lower in terms of our snowpack of Washington, also very big drought years. 2014 would be the best case scenario. We were pretty low in February of 2014 as well, like now, but we did receive a lot of precipitation that fell as snow in those later months that got us pretty close up to normal in 2014. And then I put a few other years that are, did better than where we are now, and just but how they ended up by the end of the year. So right now we're at the third lowest snowpack as of yesterday, and that's going back to 1985. There doesn't look like we will necessarily have a repeat of 2014, but I did want to put that up as sort of a best case scenario. This is taking a look at some of our averages. So just emphasizing that most of our snowpack building season has passed us. We get 7.5 inches of statewide snow water equivalent in both December and January on average, and those are gone now. Typically only 34% of our median April 1 snowpack peak comes after February 1st. So we're later in the season, less likely to have some sort of miracle in terms of making up our snowpack. This is showing that projection plot again. So these aren't forecasts. Instead it's showing a range of possibilities based on what we've experienced in the past. So the green line is if we were to have normal snowpack from going forward, where would we end up by April 1? And then that dark blue line is the maximum we've seen on record from this point forward. So really only if we were to see if we were to see more than 90% of what we saw in the historical records, we would get back to normal by April 1st. And I just wanted to note that there were some beneficial results from that heavy December precipitation. Of course, we wish it didn't all come at once and cause devastating flooding throughout the region, but it did fill reservoirs to higher than normal. This is looking at all the Yakima Basin reservoirs. The blue line is the current year, red line is average, green is the previous year. So we were running much below average in October and most of November. December, they were able to fill the reservoirs to higher than what they would normally be at that time of year. So there's more water storage there. However, notice the peak in the average around May, June, and July. That happens when our snowpack melts. And if we don't have the snowpack, we won't see those that water storage increase because that comes from the contributions of snowmelt. So even though the reservoirs are higher than normal for this time of year, they're certainly not full, and we're still relying on snowmelt from a snowpack that pretty much is much below normal in that region.
We are wrapping up our time on the road, diving into the dire snow drought situation here on the West Coast, especially here in Oregon. You can see it behind me here at Summit Pass. almost bare here. I had in-depth conversations with climate scientists about the impacts that this could have on our wildfire season, recreation, agriculture, and our economy. If you would like to see the full show again or share it with your friends, please point your phone's camera at the QR code on your screen, and that will take you right to the ArcPDX YouTube page. Thank you all so much for joining us this morning. Don't forget, we go on the road once a week here on ArcPDX. For 2 hours, we dive deep into the biggest issue that is authentic and relevant to all of you. And we want to hear from you, so please let us know what topics we should tackle next. Just send us an email to arcpdx@katu.com. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Enjoy this holiday weekend, and please do those snow dances. Bye, everybody.